In the sun-kissed cradle of Tripoli's ancient walls, a local dynasty once wore the crescent banner, ruling with hands that trembled under the weight of ambition and circumstance. This is the story of the Karamanli dynasty, a family that governed Tripoli from 1711 to 1835, a century and a quarter of fragile power, glittering trade, and the dark, sorrowful tide of piracy. Imagine Tripoli's harbor at twilight, the water shimmering with the last rays of the sun. But this isn't just a peaceful port, it's a hive of activity. Corsair ships, their sails full, return heavy with captured goods, their decks filled with gold, spices, and tragically, human captives. This was the dual nature of Karamanli rule, expanding legitimate trade that glittered like starlight, while simultaneously sanctioning piracy that stained the Mediterranean with sorrow. The dynasty began in 1711 when a local officer of Anatolian origin, Ahmed Karamanli, seized power in a coup. He was a clever and ruthless leader. He understood that the Ottoman Empire, the official ruler of the region, was distant and increasingly indifferent. Its power was waning, its attention focused on crises closer to home. Ahmed convinced the Sultan in Istanbul to recognize him as the legitimate governor, the Pasha of Tripoli. In exchange, he pledged loyalty and promised to send annual tribute. It was a deal born of convenience. The Ottomans got a loyal subject to manage a remote province, and Ahmed got a crown, albeit a fragile one. Under Ahmed and his successors, Tripoli blossomed into a semi-independent state. They built magnificent palaces, mosques, and fortifications, many of which still stand today, testaments to an era of prosperity. The Karamanlis weren't just pirates, they were shrewd diplomats and traders. They signed treaties with European powers, profiting from the bustling trade routes that crossed their domain. Caravans laden with goods from sub-Saharan Africa arrived in Tripoli, their wares destined for the markets of Europe. The city became a vibrant hub of commerce, a crossroads of cultures. But we cannot ignore the darker side of this golden age. The Karamanli economy was heavily dependent on corsairing. The Barbary pirates, operating under the Pasha's protection, were the terror of the Mediterranean. They preyed on merchant ships from European and American nations, capturing vessels, seizing cargo, and holding crews and passengers for ransom. This practice, while immensely profitable, brought immense suffering. The slave markets of Tripoli were filled with people captured at sea, their lives shattered, their families broken. This income from piracy and ransom was what funded the beautiful architecture and the lavish court of the Pashas. It was a prosperity built on the misery of others. This reliance on piracy inevitably led to conflict. The European powers and the newly formed United States of America were not willing to tolerate this threat to their shipping indefinitely. They paid tribute for a time, a form of protection money to ensure safe passage for their ships. But patience wore thin. This led to a series of wars known as the Barbary Wars. The most famous of these involved the United States. In the early 1800s, President Thomas Jefferson decided to stop paying tribute and sent the fledgling U.S. Navy to confront the pirates. This conflict, the First Barbary War, saw dramatic naval battles, a daring raid to burn the captured American frigate USS Philadelphia in Tripoli Harbor, and an overland expedition by U.S. Marines. An event immortalized in the Marine Corps hymn with the line "To the Shores of Tripoli." These wars were costly for the Karamanlis. They exposed the limits of their power and began to drain their treasury. European naval blockades choked off the trade that was so vital to Tripoli's economy. The dynasty, which had thrived on its control of the seas, was now being strangled by it. At the same time, internal strife began to tear the family apart. Yusuf Karamanli, one of the most famous rulers of the dynasty, had to contend with rivalries and rebellions from his own brothers. The internal power struggles weakened the state just as external pressures were mounting. By the 1830s, the Karamanli dynasty was in a state of terminal decline. The treasury was empty, the military was weakened, and the family was consumed by infighting. The European powers, particularly Britain and France, circled like vultures, sensing an opportunity to expand their influence in North Africa. The Ottoman Empire, which had been content to let the Karamanlis rule for over a century, saw the chaos and decided to reassert its direct control. The Sultan in Istanbul, Mahmud II, was in the midst of a period of military and administrative reform. He saw the instability in Tripoli as both a threat and an opportunity, a chance to reclaim a lost province and demonstrate renewed Ottoman strength. In 1835, the end came swiftly. The Sultan sent a fleet to Tripoli, not to support the Pasha, but to depose him. Under the pretext of mediating a local succession dispute, Ottoman troops landed, took control of the city, and declared the end of Karamanli rule. The last Pasha was sent into exile. After 124 years of semi-independence, Tripolitania was once again a direct province of the Ottoman Empire. The beacon of the Karamanli dynasty, which had burned so brightly, was extinguished by the very empire that had first sanctioned its rise. The legacy of the Karamanlis is complex and layered. They were nation builders who forged a distinct identity for Tripoli. They were patrons of the arts and architecture, leaving behind a beautiful city. But they were also rulers who presided over a system built on piracy and slavery. Their era was a time of both proud independence and brutal exploitation. It was a fragile golden age, a corsair kingdom that ultimately could not withstand the changing tides of history. As we look at the old city of Tripoli today, we can still see the ghosts of this era. The Grand Saraya, the Pasha's castle, still overlooks the harbor. The elegant Karamanli Mosque still calls the faithful to prayer. These stones whisper stories of power, wealth, rebellion, and loss. They remind us of a time when this North African city was a power in its own right, a force to be reckoned with on the high seas. From a local family's audacious rise to its heartbreaking fall, the story of the Karamanli dynasty is a poignant chapter in the long and dramatic history of Libya. The corsair gold is long gone, but the questions and the echoes of their reign remain. What do you think about this complex legacy? Was it a story of heroic independence or a dark chapter of exploitation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into history, please subscribe for more.